This is the wacky bare bones tour of the Fender sound system. To unpack the system, you loosen the buckles at the top, and then the speakers are released, although you have to kind of wiggle it to get their feet out of the grooves. Next, there is a trap door in the back, and inside you'll find 2 speaker wires, mic and mic cord, and the ever-essential power cord. Once you plug the power cord into the back, everything else that you'll need to deal with is in the front, including the on-off button.
There are several main sections on this mixing board. There's the place for the electronics to plug into for both inputs and outputs. This whole section is for controlling the individual channels. This is channels 1, 2, 3, and 4. Channel 1 input is controlled by this whole strip here. And then this separate section is for these 2 stereo channels. This is where the master volumes are. There are 2 forms of inputs you can provide into an input plug, but you want to use either one or the other. You do not want to plug 2 plugs at the same time into each of the inputs. This is called a mixer because it takes signals from each of the individual channels and it blends them together according to how you wish them to be blended. This is a relatively simple board. This set of knobs over here for channels 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the master volumes. If you got a microphone plugged into channel 1 and you want that microphone to be louder, you can just increase its level, and that raises the relative level of the microphone, its volume, compared to these other channels. If the guitar is on channel 2, what you're trying to do here is get the correct blend of microphone to voice. You don't want the microphone to be so loud that you can't hear the guitar, and you don't want the guitar to be so loud that you can't hear the vocals. Notice that these 4 channels all have the same knobs. So typical settings are equalizer straight up, reverb down to nothing, or maybe a little bit of reverb, pan up at 12 so it's in the neutral position. So this knob always needs to be down to 0. This is channel 5 and channel 6. Typically you would start with these all in the neutral position, meaning that the indicator is pointing to 12 o'clock. Reverb, typically you do not want to add reverb to something like an iPod. And then pan, as before, we don't really want the sound coming stronger out of the left or the right. This section on the Fender is the master volume area. Be very aware of and careful of where this button is set and then where these plugs go. This big knob up here is controlling the volume of both speakers, the left and the right, because I've now taken the left and right speaker wires and plugged them into this thing called main, and this button up here is now down in this mode where this big dial controls the volume. I would start off with this at neutral, pointed straight up. I would take all the reverb out of the system. First thing you do is make sure the power is off, and then you connect in your components. Typical convention is to try to connect your microphones into the first few channels and then your instruments into the later channels. Let me just show you again how they work. So I've got the master volume up, but the volume on all my individual channels are down. So even though I speak into the mic, you don't hear anything. But if I wish to increase the level of vocals that you hear from the mic, which connected in channel 1, I can increase the volume. And you hear that my voice is kind of bassy, so if I were to take the EQ all the way over, it kind of becomes tinny sounding. And if I go all the way over to here, it becomes very boomy and bassy sounding. So be sure to play with that. Do not be afraid of these knobs. You need to adjust them to get your vocals and your guitars and everything sounding like you want them to sound. I'm going to turn on a soundtrack. That's the input that's going through here, but again we don't hear it because I don't have the volume up on it on that individual channel yet. There, I just turned it up a little bit, and you can hear my voice and the music at the same time.
And finally, your job as the sound person is to use this mixing board to get the best possible sound for the audience. You do that by adjusting the volumes on individual channels to get their correct blend, and by adjusting the EQ on each of the individual channels to get the best sound from each of the inputs. This has been a wacky, bare-bones lesson in the Fender sound system. I encourage you to come back and watch the full video on the Fender system so you can better understand how everything works. See you next time.